In the middle of June 2026, the UK government let it be known that they were planning to water down their so-called ZEV mandate. There will still be an outright ban on sales of new petrol and diesel cars effective from 2030, but the suggestion is that instead of 80% of all new car sales having to be pure battery electric by that date, the target will be lowered to only 50%. That means the remaining share could continue to be made up of combustion engine vehicles, including hybrids and plug-in hybrids. Now, I realise that if you live in North America, you're facing all sorts of other challenges with the rollout of electric vehicles that make our latest little predicament look like a utopian dream. But nevertheless, all things are relative, aren't they? And compared to the current UK legislation, this latest proposal is a total cop-out. But why is that, Dave, I hear you cry? Surely those nice, unintimidating hybrid vehicles are a harmless transition technology to help reticent buyers get used to the idea of a bit of electric power under their right foot and ease gently into the new electrified domestic transport paradigm. And if they're driven carefully and only around town at low speeds, then they'll be predominantly powered by the battery, not the engine. So what's not to like? What's not to like is that last suggestion is total hopium bullshit, propagated by legacy car makers who have failed to get their arses into gear in time to meet the existing legislation. So why are hybrid vehicles such a bad idea? And why am I so pissed off about it? Hello, and welcome to Just Have a Think. Now, you know me, folks, a normally mild-mannered chap who tries to bring you a carefully considered and calmly delivered analysis of the latest climate and sustainable energy news. This week, though, I am mostly angry. To be honest, I was already fairly irritated by the hybrid scam cooked up by existing car makers, but now I am really jolly cross indeed. And I'm British, you know. I'm not going to waste too much of your time ranting and raving, though. I am simply going to take a look at empirical data to compare the three types of domestic vehicle now in competition with each other: traditional internal combustion engine cars, hybrid electric cars, and pure battery electric cars. According to this 2022 white paper published by the International Council on Clean Transportation and the world-renowned Fraunhofer Institute in Germany, plug-in hybrid cars often perform vastly worse than their official figures and can be almost as bad for greenhouse gas emissions as petrol or diesel cars in real-world use. The paper's authors found that European PHEVs consume 3 to 5 times more fuel in real-world driving than WLTP figures suggest. Private PHEVs emitted between 90 and 105 grams of carbon dioxide for every kilometre they were driven, while company car PHEV emissions were on average between 175 and 195 grams of CO2 per kilometre. The official number used to justify the existence of PHEVs is, wait for it, 37 to 39 grams of CO2 per kilometre. It is a scam. But how are the legacy car makers getting away with such a blatant con job? Well, of course, as dear old Volkswagen demonstrated so ably with their Dieselgate shenanigans, a car can be made to produce almost any result you like under the right conditions. But the ICCT Fraunhofer research showed that PHEV drivers on average simply don't charge their batteries often enough to get anywhere near those performance numbers. They might do for a couple of months after they buy the car during their novelty period, but after that, for a whole mixture of behavioural and practical reasons, many drivers simply don't bother. And because many PHEVs have powerful combustion engines and heavy bodies and are now carrying around an almost completely redundant set of heavy batteries as well, in the worst use case scenarios, those emissions figures can approach and occasionally exceed comparable combustion vehicles. Now, if you own a PHEV and you're screaming at the screen that you drive it super responsibly and can provide your own data proving how much CO2 you're saving, then well done you. But you are very much the exception to the rule. And if you've got one of those so-called self-charging hybrids, then oh my God, I've got several bridges I'd like to sell you. And I believe the Statue of Liberty is up for grabs too at a bargain price. I mean, technically, the engineering isn't a con, but the implication that the car is somehow creating clean energy for free, that's the bit I have a problem with. Here's what the glossy commercials would actually say if they were really telling the truth.
Introducing the new Pulse Throb self-charging hybrid, a petrol car that has a small battery that recovers some wasted energy and occasionally drives electrically for short distances.
Not quite so snappy, is it? A self-charging hybrid still burns petrol for essentially all its energy. It still emits CO2 every kilometre over its lifetime. It still has exhaust pollutants. It still needs oil changes, exhaust systems, engine maintenance and all the rest of it. It cannot take advantage of an increasingly cleaner electricity grid. By contrast, a pure battery electric vehicle gets cleaner automatically as the grid decarbonises. It can use renewable electricity directly, for example from solar panels on the roof of your house, and the electric drivetrain can convert between 80 and 90% of battery energy into motion because it avoids the thermodynamic losses of a combustion, which result in the paltry 25 to 30% conversion rates you get from a typical internal combustion engine car. A fossil fuel engine is fundamentally limited by heat engine efficiency. Even the very best hybrids struggle to turn much more than 35 to 40% of the fuel energy into useful work, and that's only in the most favourable of conditions. The research group Transport and Environment published their own findings in late 2025. Now, admittedly, they are a campaign group, so there's a bit of they would say that, wouldn't they, to take into account here. But nevertheless, they surveyed no fewer than 127,000 plug-in hybrid vehicle owners to put together their analysis. What they found is that in the real world, PHEVs emitted only 19% less CO2 per kilometre than petrol and diesel cars. That's way below the claimed reductions implied by official tests. This most recent ICCT analysis, published in July 2025, finds that across the full life cycle of each type of vehicle, as an average across Europe, greenhouse gas emissions from pure battery electric cars, mainly from the manufacturing of the batteries in the first place, were 73% lower than petrol cars. Hybrids were only 20% lower on average, and plug-in hybrids were 30% lower. So even when PHEVs are granted full, probably slightly generous credit for real-world electric driving, they're still almost 3 times worse than pure battery electric cars on a full life cycle emissions basis. So while marketers and legacy car makers wax lyrical about the wondrous benefits of hybrids and plug-in hybrids, lulling millions of people into a false sense of climate responsibility, the evidence shows that they are in fact a very weak climate solution compared with full battery electric cars. In real-world use, plug-in hybrids often emit several times more CO2 than their official ratings suggest, and in some company car use cases they can get worryingly close to ordinary petrol and diesel vehicles. Now, in July 2025, the UK government reintroduced a purchase incentive for new battery electric cars, offering up to £3,750 off eligible models. The naysayers have been quick to argue that while the new grant clearly increased consumer interest, a purchase discount alone does not appear to have overcome all the barriers that are holding back private EV adoption. Why? Well, it's certainly not because electric vehicles aren't a better technology that save consumers money over their operational lifetimes. They absolutely are, and they absolutely do. It's perhaps more likely to be because for most people buying a new car in the UK today, a discount on the showroom price is less psychologically powerful because they're getting the car on a lease deal. The discount still applies on lease purchases, but the difference it makes to the monthly payments is in most cases too small to be a deciding factor. So here's an idea for Mr. Miliband and Ms. Reeves and whoever's the Prime Minister at the time of posting this video. Instead of offering a discount off the ticket price, how about a 90% reduction on all public charging for all new full battery electric vehicle buyers for, let's say 5 years? Let's crunch those numbers using data from the website National Vehicle Solutions, plus one of the UK's largest public charging network providers, GridServe. We'll take an average UK driver doing about 7,000 miles a year with a typical EV efficiency of 4 miles per kilowatt hour. The energy required to do those miles works out at 1,750 kilowatt hours per year, so over 5 years that'd be 8,750 kilowatt hours. According to a UK charge point location app called ZapMap, typical public charging prices are roughly 54 pence per kilowatt hour on a slow public charger and about 79 pence on rapid chargers. So let's apply a mixed public charging average of 60 pence. Now at this point I'm going to make what might be regarded as a slightly contentious claim. I would suggest that the vast majority of people who already own an electric vehicle in 2026 are in the higher than average earning bracket and are therefore more likely to have off-street parking. For those folks, most of their charging will be at home anyway at a nice overnight rate of only 7 pence a unit, thank you very much. So this little thought experiment probably doesn't really affect them at all. But for the next tranche of EV owners, the majority of people in the big bulgy part of the normal distribution curve, off-street parking is much less likely to be an option. So those folks will be largely constrained to some sort of public charging service. So just for simplicity, let's say all of your charging came from public charging. The 5-year cost at 60 pence a unit would be £5,250. If the government funded 90% of that, then the driver would effectively only be paying 6 pence per unit, and their 5-year cost would drop to only £525, a saving of £4,725, which is of course a larger number than the current purchase grant. But what would it cost the government? Well, the government would no longer be subsidising an upfront retail price, would it? It'd be subsidising a charging discount over 5 years. That means there's a discounted rate that economists much smarter than me would tell us needs to be applied here, because there is a much smaller initial capital outlay for the exchequer. Plus, a good chunk of the discount could be funded by removing the absolutely scandalous discrepancy that means someone who can afford to charge at home only pays 5% VAT on their electricity, whereas someone who's forced to charge up on a public network has to pay 20% VAT. Talk about a perverse incentive. And as I outlined just now, the current purchase grant gives the same support to everyone, even folks who can charge cheaply at home every night, have solar panels, own a driveway, and are relatively wealthy. But a charging subsidy would be naturally targeted towards flats, terraced houses, renters, and low-income households. Just a thought. Anyway, if none of what I've said so far has convinced you to make the right decision when you next buy a car, how about this latest research from the highly respected analysts at Carbon Brief, showing that the UK drivers of pure battery electric vehicles are now saving on average £1,100 a year on fuel costs alone, 3 times as much as the average plug-in hybrid driver. And that's before you factor in all the other savings from not having to service and maintain a fossil fuel combustion drivetrain that can contain well over 1,000 moving components, all of which are constantly in the process of deterioration from having to withstand the forces of 3,000 to 7,000 explosions every minute of their operational life. Now, if you're watching this in the United States of America, you'll probably argue that there is simply not enough choice of new electric models. And I accept that. Your president has decided to make your country a petro-state, while pretty much everyone else in the world is sprinting towards electro-state status. And by the way, if you want an explanation of how that's going, then watch this brilliant talk from Michael Leibreich at a recent Modo energy conference. But honestly, here in the UK, across Europe, and even down in Africa, not to mention Southeast Asia and China and Australia, the number of really quite astonishingly good battery electric vehicles is rocketing up an almost exponential curve. And it's not just big expensive cars either, and it's not just Chinese and Korean brands, although you could argue it's very definitely those brands that are dragging legacy car makers kicking and screaming into the 21st century. No, we've now got a whole bunch of sub £20,000 options and literally dozens of models under 30,000. I hear even GM is bringing back its very popular little Chevy Bolt at the end of this year, with a 260-mile range lithium iron phosphate battery that can charge 2.5 times quicker than the previous Bolt, all for about $29,000. So maybe there is a bit of hope for you folks across the pond after all. Now, I've always tried to avoid preaching on this channel. I like to set out the facts, maybe give a bit of my own opinion, but ultimately leave you to make your own minds up. That's why the channel's called Just Have a Think. But on this one, I'm going to break that rule. Don't buy a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid. They're fucking useless and a complete waste of everyone's time. Ideally, frankly, don't buy a car at all if you can possibly manage it. But if you are thinking of buying a new or used car, just get on board and buy a full battery electric model. They're better, they're cheaper to run, and increasingly cheaper to own. They're so much easier to maintain, and they really are far less damaging to our environment and the atmosphere. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. I'm sure they'll be lively and interesting as ever. But that's it for this week. A massive thank you to the amazing folks over at Patreon who support the channel on a monthly basis and enable me to keep ads and sponsorship messages out of your way. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And most importantly of all, thanks very much for watching. Have a great week, and remember to just have a think. See you next week.